Good evening. This is Left, Right and Centre. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj has talked tough today on Pakistan and cross-border terrorism to US Secretary of State John Kerry, who in turn has reaffirmed America's support to India on terror. But is that enough? Can the US and will it do more vis-a-vis Pakistan?
Pakistan-sponsored cross-border terror was India's big focus at this second US-India strategic and commercial dialogue, where Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj minced no words.
पाकिस्तान के लिए ये आवश्यक है कि वो अपने यहाँ आतंकवादियों जैसे कि लश्कर-ए-तैयबा, जैश-ए-मोहम्मद और डी कंपनी के लिए शरणस्थली को खत्म करे कि किसी भी राष्ट्र को आतंकवाद पर दोहरे मानदंड नहीं अपनाने चाहिए.
John Kerry was clear in the US support for India, saying there was no good or bad terror, but also had some praise for Islamabad's handling of terror in recent months.
The United States stands in strong partnership with India against all terrorism, no matter where it comes from, no matter what form it takes. And we have had conversations with all of the members of the region, frankly, about efforts they need to take to curb terrorism. The Haqqani network and others have operated out of the western part of the country. And so it is vital that Pakistan join with other nations in tackling this challenge.
India also lobbied for more support at the Nuclear Suppliers Group, which meets later this year. An agreement on fighting cybercrime was another takeaway. The Commerce Ministers' dialogue looked at how investment could be boosted. Both sides have decided to focus on tourism, with the first ever bilateral dialogue on travel and tourism taking place on Wednesday.
John Kerry's visit to Delhi comes at a time when India-Pakistan ties are virtually in deep freeze. While Sushma Swaraj strongly articulated India's position on terror, the question is how much can and will the United States do vis-a-vis Pakistan? In New Delhi, Nidhi Razdan for NDTV. Well, joining us on the program tonight, we have joining us via Skype Lisa Curtis, who's a Senior Research Fellow at the Asian Studies Center at the Heritage Foundation. She's joining us from Washington, D.C. Ajoy Kumar from the Congress Party and Siddharth Nath Singh of the BJP joining us as well, and will be joined by G Parthasarathy, former High Commissioner to Pakistan, shortly. Ms. Curtis, to you first, how would you look at these statements today that were made, particularly with regard to terrorism? I got a sense that for India, that was clearly the biggest takeaway from this meeting, given that within 2 minutes of Mrs. Sushma Swaraj's opening statement at the press conference, this is the first thing she talked about.
Well, I think you could see reflected in John Kerry's statement a level of frustration with Pakistan. And I think we have very much seen in the U.S. Congress, patience is wearing thin with regard to Pakistan's double dealings. That means supporting some terrorist groups that attack India or Afghanistan, whether it be Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, or the Haqqani network in Afghanistan, and its support for fighting some other terrorists like the TTP or Al-Qaeda. And we've seen that the U.S. Congress has reduced coalition support funding. These are reimbursements paid to Pakistan's military for its operations along the border with Afghanistan. There's been a reduction in those funds. The U.S. Congress has also blocked funding for the F-16 aircraft because of Pakistan's failure to crack down on the Haqqani network. So I think you see a growing frustration in the U.S. with Pakistan's policies with regard to terrorism, and perhaps this frustration was reflected in some of the comments that Secretary Kerry made in New Delhi.
He is, of course, a good diplomat, so he also had to do a balancing act, Ms. Curtis, didn't he, when he talked about how Pakistan was also making some progress on its western front vis-a-vis the Haqqani network, for instance. He was careful to make that distinction between exactly where they were taking action, which is why I would want to ask you, how much pressure can the U.S. really put on Pakistan when it comes to dealing with groups that attack India?
Well, I think the U.S. Does have leverage that it can exercise over Pakistan. And the problem is the U.S. has never really exercised that leverage. And so what I'm saying is I think we're beginning to see the U.S. Congress use the leverage that it has. It controls the purse strings. So it's enforcing aid conditions that have long been on Pakistan but that the Obama administration has used its waiver authority, national security waiver authority, to waive those conditions, while the U.S. Congress is saying no more. We're not going to waive those conditions. We're going to enforce those conditions. So you are seeing the U.S. enforce those conditions with regard to the Haqqani network. Now, you're right. The U.S. has not done as much with regard to the LET or Jaish-e-Mohammed, although we have seen steps to try to target the leadership, putting the bounty on Hafiz Muhammad Saeed, the 10 million bounty for information leading to his arrest.
But he continues to have public rallies in Islamabad and Lahore despite that bounty. And so, Siddharth Nath Singh, the question then to the government would be that this is a government and administration in the US that is on its way out. We don't know what the next administration would be. There is a hope that there would be a continuation in foreign policy. But is there a sense of frustration that the US can do more vis-a-vis Pakistan?
Well, I think
this is for Mr. Siddharth Nath Singh of the BJP. Sorry. This is for Mr. Siddharth Nath Singh of the BJP. Yeah.
Well,
All right. I apologize. I think that
in diplomacy,
okay, sure,
I think we all need to look at.
All right. I apologize. A technical problem there. Ajoy Kumar, let me ask you on that. That isn't it important that the government has put terrorism emanating from Pakistan on the map? Whether it is what Sushma Swaraj has said to John Kerry today, whether it is the Prime Minister's statements from the Red Fort, whatever it is the central issue today, and it is certainly being pushed that way. Ajoy Kumar.
Look, Nidhi, all governments, and whether it is this government or the previous government, all governments have always tried to put pressure on the international community, exposing Pakistan's interference in internal affairs and matters of Kashmir, whether it is 2611 in Mumbai. But I think the main point is that we need to we can raise it with the United States. The United States is going to be purely focused on what are their strategic interests. Their strategic interest is on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border more. Because if there was a cooperation, then there would have been much more information sharing on the training camps across the line of actual control. So India has to look after its own interests. I think it is appropriate forum to raise these issues. I think there is definitely the right thing to do, whether it is the terrorist camps across the line of control, whether it's the Dawood Ibrahim issue, whether it's the Pakistan continued support to the various terrorist groups which are inimical to India. Those are things which are necessary and has to be done, and you cannot find faults with that. The question is, can you expect the United States to do much more than what they are already doing right now? Not so sure. I think the United States will purely look at it from their interest. They have a lot of leverage, but we have not seen that leverage being used on Jaish-e-Mohammed or Lashkar-e-Toiba.
And
so,
I think, yeah,
a large part of that, large part of the fight,
yeah, no, absolutely, and I think that continues to be the major concern. Ambassador, yeah, sorry, you can finish that point. Yes.
So I'm saying that purely from an international community standpoint, raising this issue is fine. But on the ground, it is how we respond, and we need to trust our own intelligence and our own efforts to take action against the Pakistani subversive activities in the country.
Well, Ambassador Parthasarathy is joining us as well tonight. Mr. Parthasarathy, how do you see the US-India statements tonight? You've always been very practical about how you see how much the US can do vis-a-vis Pakistan, but as you smile at my question, do you think anything is really changing? Lisa Curtis believes that there was a tone of frustration in John Kerry's comments today about a lack of action by Pakistan. Did you detect that note of frustration as well?
Well, let me put it in a larger perspective. The United States will deal with countries on the basis of what it believes is its national interest. That perception of US national interest has undergone a change after they found that more and more of their soldiers were getting killed in Afghanistan. And then they just could not leave the place. So the heat has been turned by the Congress in the light of this realistic circumstances. Having said that, it takes two to tango. So I think quite obviously they will be looking for how positive we are in our overall approach to the region. And now they are finding a couple of things, that in Afghanistan, as General Nicholson, the army commander in Afghanistan, maintained in Delhi, there are links between the Jaish and Lashkar on the one hand and the Taliban and the ISI on the other. So this linkage is now hurting the United States, and therefore they are certainly much more ready to cooperate. But ultimately it takes two to tango. Yes, the US will cooperate with us. Just for your information, from what I have learned, 2 days ago Nawaz Sharif spoke to the American ambassador complaining about the stand that the United States had taken on the Jaish-e-Mohammed attack on Pathankot. After all, they did provide a lot of intelligence to us and then confronted the Pakistanis with it. This is not something they would have done 5 years ago.
That's
so there
interesting.
Is a change.
You do see a change in attitude, and of course every country will act for its own interest. And I apologize, we had lost the line with Siddharthnath Singh. We have him on the phone line as we try to get the OB back up. Siddharthnath Singh, my question to you was whether, even though you've had these statements of support coming from the US, that there is a degree of frustration within the government and even the BJP on whether the US can do more vis-a-vis the terror groups that attack India.
Well, Nidhi, all I can say is that, there has been always a discussion that US can do more for India. But at the same time, we also need to look at our side also. And there are a number of positive things which has happened in India. One is there is a decisive leadership. There is a strong government. There is a mandate to that government. And the way the foreign policy is evolving, and with the certain issues which are of concern for the US also, which is in the Asia-Pacific region and particularly related to the South China Sea. So all those things put together, it is how India engages with US and uses the strength which India has with formulating the strategic relationship. And therefore, I do see a convergence happening between India and US, and India's concern being addressed by the US government. So I do feel that what it was few years back, the same situation will not be existing between India's relationship with US and what India wants from US.
Well, just to get quick last comments, Lisa Curtis, what happens in a new administration? I think everyone, of course, now is waiting to see what this new administration will be. What would happen, for instance, if a President Trump was there? Do you really see a continuation in the policy, or is it just something you can't predict?
Well, I think regardless of who is elected, you're going to see a toughening stand. As I indicated, we've already seen that happening in the U.S. Congress. There's less patience, less willingness to turn a blind eye to Pakistan's support for some terrorist groups. And I think that will only increase with a new U.S. president, regardless of who that is. There won't be patience. There is going to be frustration unless Pakistan acts against these groups. And I would just point out that if you go back to the 2009 Kerry Lugar-Berman legislation, the conditions on military aid to Pakistan include Pakistan taking action not only against the Haqqani network, but also the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed. Now, the U.S. Congress has chosen to enforce the conditions that relate only to the Haqqani network, but I would argue that now they need to enforce the conditions that include Pakistan taking action against those groups that attack India as well. Only with a sort of comprehensive approach in getting Pakistan to stop supporting any terrorist groups, that's the only way that we're going to have success with Pakistan in terms of making sure that Pakistan is not a sanctuary for any terrorist groups.
There was another interesting development today, and an important development actually, with the two countries signing a defense logistics agreement. Ajay Kumar, why has the Congress attacked that defense logistics agreement? What is the reasoning?
Look, the fundamental issue with what we have said is that it has gone against the spirit in which India used to continuously have a neutral position in terms of any kind of military engagement with any foreign power. It has put India in a strange position because Nidhi, we never had an agreement like this ever, and when the United States used to discuss this issue, we were very careful on what it would mean for as far as the security of this country goes. The government has been at a lot of pains to say that the bases won't be used, it will only be for transportation, etc. But I was in a previous TV channel where one of the spokespersons of the BJP said, it is bringing us closer to the US influence, we need the United States to support us. Not realizing that what does it do in the global, what does it do to the relationship with our other friends? Russia, who's been a friend with us. So all this needs a great deal of deliberation. Apart from that, is it the chapter 1 in the chapter 2 and chapter 3 are the other two agreements? One is on information sharing, the other one is on geospatial information
take
sharing.
The principle that
Both
you raised.
these
Okay,
have a lot of repercussions to the country.
You're saying India is allying itself too closely with the United States. Siddharth Singh, do you want to take that on? Because that actually, we are seeing certainly a very big foreign policy shift. It may not be a bad thing. With Mr. Modi strengthening ties with the United States, going all out to strengthen ties with Japan as well. And in the process, a new sort of foreign policy paradigm is emerging. Siddharth.
Well, there is certainly a paradigm shift in the foreign policy because there was a kind of, in last 10 years what we had seen, although I would say after 2004, there was a process of engaging with countries and making our foreign policy also robust during the UPA 1, I would say, but somewhere there was a kind of things stopped moving in the UPA 2. And in that, if I look at from that angle, it is important under the Prime Minister Modi, we have engaged not only with US, we have engaged with China, we have engaged with Japan, we have engaged even with Vietnam and many other countries, and including Russia. So, and Mauritius and Maldives and Sri Lanka. So therefore, to conclude or the Congress to start thinking that we are going to align with the US and be in that group, I think it's a far-fetched idea, and that could be only for political reasons to criticize, whereas the joint statement is very, very clear where we stand and what the this logistic memorandum is all about. So I don't think the Congress should be worrying. Yes, politically, they feel what they could not achieve with US on the strategic relationship, the BJP or the BJP government under Prime Minister Modi is able to achieve.
Okay, quick rebuttal from Ajoy before I take that question to the ambassador. Yeah.
Nidhi, the funniest part is the Bharatiya Janata Party opposed the Indo-US nuclear deal for so long. Suddenly they find this long-lost love for what we are trying to say is we are warning the government. What is in the public domain is worrisome. Why don't they make the details public? And why are they skirting over the main issues? It is not utilization of bases. It will be humanitarian. All these sends confusing signals. Let them share it, and I think it would have been fair to share it with on the floor of the House and take it forward. The whole secrecy, whether it is this or whether it's the Naga Accord, leads a lot of questions. And the last point, I think we must make sure that the only issue which we need to ensure is India's strategic interest, and that should be protected.
Well, Mr. Parthasarathy, do you agree that the defense agreement somehow sends a confusing signal on where we stand vis-a-vis our foreign policy and our leanings?
I think the Congress spokesman has said various things which need to be taken into account. First, transparency. I think the opposition and everybody else should be taken into account. Second, these are the 5 agreements which were initiated when Mr. Pranab Mukherjee went to Washington. And I know for a fact that Prime Minister Manmohan Singh would have very happily looked at them like he looked at the Indo-US nuclear deal. He was a man with a vision. Today you are not living in a 1980s world of non-alignment. Countries are multiple aligned. We get our weapons even from Israel. We get our weapons from the US. The idea is to keep your options open. And don't forget that Mr. Nehru was prepared to give the Americans bases when we were attacked by the Chinese in 1962. It depends on the circumstances. The circumstances are such, you have a hostile China, you have an effective China-Pakistan alliance in which Gwadar is going to interdict our sea routes. So having naval cooperation with the United States is perfectly in order. Getting weapons from the United States and Russia is perfectly in order. And let's realize we are living in a changing world. But yes, I think in a democracy like ours, the opposition should be taken into confidence. For example, no government has yet presented to Parliament the serious nature of the joint threat that China and Pakistan working together pose to us. So I think we need a far more open debate on this.
Absolutely.
But as far as I am concerned, this is a long pending agreement. It was only because of the opposition of one minister, Mr. Antony, did not go forward.
Right.
And I'm glad we've seen sense and signed this. We are not mortgaging our sovereignty. The United States does not have a right to bases. We will provide them facilities when it suits us. Let me add one more thing. If we have a problem in the Gulf and we have to evacuate 6 million Indian citizens, then you will have to function out of the US base in Bahrain.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to thank you
will have to function out of the US base in Bahrain.
Well,
so let's realize it's a changing world.
Well, it's been an interesting day, and it's not over yet because the Secretary of State, John Kerry, will be at the IIT in Delhi tomorrow, where he's going to make a speech and also take a lot of questions from students. So it will be interesting to see what kind of questions are thrown at him and what he says to those. So thank you to all of you for joining us tonight, and we leave you with the news that perhaps will excite more people than anything else, which is Apple's next big launch.